Everybody, again, thanks for tuning in. I want you to know that if you have any idea who Peaches or Baby Doe is, because we're going to put up a $10,000 reward, all right, call the numbers we put up for you. Do not try and contact us. Call the numbers that are put up for you. Law enforcement has to follow up on identifying Baby Doe or Peaches. That's what's important. Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody, and thanks for tuning in. John Kelly, profiler here, and welcome. Welcome to you all. We're so happy to have you here today, and we are so honored to have Dustin Ranck on the show. He's a private investigator. He's also an artist, and he's a tattoo artist as well, which is really appropriate for this show, because we're going to be talking about Peaches and Baby Doe in this show. Also, I want to thank Pam Bogart. We're very honored to have Pam Bogart here. Great researcher and investigator, comes to us from crisis at probation in New Jersey. Great investigator and counselor for crisis. Which was invaluable to the residents of New Jersey. So we're just so thrilled to have both of them on with me. We're just thrilled. I'm just thrilled to have them both on with me today. I mean, these guys really know what they're doing, and they've seen it all. They've seen it all. Believe me, they've seen it all. So what we're going to do is focus on, who are Peaches and Baby Doe? Peaches and Baby Doe, we've heard those names for a long time, but who are they? Right? Who are they? That's the question. So we're going to try and crack into that today a little bit, and something we're going to do today, a little different than a lot of other people are doing, is STALK, STALK, System to Apprehend Lethal Killers Incorporated. Our team is going to put out a $10,000 reward, one-time reward, okay, to find out for anybody out there that may know who they are, but doesn't have enough incentive to call in. Maybe this will give them the incentive that's needed. A one-time $10,000 reward, okay, for either identifying Baby Doe or Peaches. Who are they? We want to know who they are, because if we find out who one is, we know who the other is. Of course, it's probably going to be identifying Peaches, first of all, and that's what our conversation is going to be about today. Identifying Peaches and leading into Baby Doe. But we've got a lot to talk about here. We definitely have a lot to talk about here. So what I'm interested in is, when we look at Peaches and we look at Baby Doe, these are two human beings that were murdered in different locations. And to our knowledge, one was, and that would be Peaches, was dismembered. To our knowledge, Baby Doe was not. And to our knowledge, it doesn't look like there was any trauma to Baby Doe. But I truly believe Baby Doe, if there was no trauma signs, then probably the poor child was smothered. That's the way I'm looking at it. After the mother was killed. I doubt before the mother was killed, but I could be wrong. And for all of you out there, we love your feedback. We love your comments. Please feel free to comment, and we'll always get back to you. Please continue to like if you like what we're doing, and please subscribe. If you want to subscribe, you want to join the team, jump on board, because we'd love to have you. And again, we really love your comments. We really have a smart following out there, and they're really on the ball. So we'd like to know what you think about what we're putting out there, the information, and help us pull it apart, and help us with the mystery. And the major mystery is who are Baby Doe and Peaches? They have names. Somebody knows them. They have relatives. I'll guarantee you. People know who they are. They just can't get it in their head or they don't want to come forward. So with the $10,000 one-time reward, if for either one, we hope that's going to give them incentive to come forward. Also, we want to send all our condolences from all of us out to the victims and their families. That is very important for us. Okay. We are very, very sorry for everything you've endured. And not only the victims, but the family members who have to live with it for the rest of their lives as well. And we've got one crazy or two crazy serial killers out there. Looks like it's coming down to show one in that particular area, but we shall see. We shall see where this goes. I also want to say that everybody's innocent until proven guilty in a court of law, and certainly that definitely is for Rex Heuermann. He is definitely innocent until found guilty in a court of law. So anyway, with that being said, let's get started. Dustin, do you want to start first?
Sure, either way. It's a pretty interesting thing about Peaches, right? Like, because she's at this point, she's the anomaly, even though it sounds like the FBI might have some leads. But as we're digging into her, we've been kind of trying to trace her origins. I came across an article that is something that I didn't know, but it struck a chord with me, especially as a tattoo guy, and even as a private investigator, right? So there was some talk that apparently Cullen, the tattoo artist, had said that Peaches had showed up for this tattoo with a couple of other women, not unusual at all, that were introduced as her cousin and her auntie. But the thing that stuck out to me about that was, if Peaches had relatives in the tri-state area, because I don't remember the exact time gap, but the time gap between that tattoo and the time she was found was not very long. I mean, it wasn't ancient history, So if those were her aunt and her cousin, there's no way, if they're living in the tri-state area, or more or less, unless they're living under a rock, that they haven't heard about the Long Island serial killer. And there's no way that, like, why would a auntie close enough to hang out with, certainly, and go to the tattoo shop, why didn't somebody report that? And I thought to myself, well, that's not that unusual, because it probably wasn't her auntie and it probably wasn't her cousin. It could be, but the lack of, hey, like, we've got a missing cousin, we've got a missing niece, within this short period of time, and especially after they came out with the tattoo, like, they would have absolutely remembered that, because apparently they were there. So I started, making some notes about that, and the lack of, any missing persons report or anonymous tips leads me to think that it's not unusual for, when people go to a tattoo shop, they take family members, they take people that are in their circles or buddies, whatever. We suspect that Peaches was a sex worker, which kind of, one, it fits the tattoo imagery for a lot of reasons. But it also it answers the question of why nobody spoke up. If she was involved with other women, now they could have been part of a stable, that they were working together. I mean, which is totally common. I mean, I tattooed hundreds of people like that, probably thousands of people. They come in groups, or small cliques or whatever. But, somebody that's working the sex trade typically isn't going to reach out to law enforcement, more or less, for any reason. And there is a lot of, I'm giving them a lot of grace here, because there's a lot of reasons they wouldn't want to have contact with law enforcement. Now, if we're looking at, the East Coast, especially, we've got Burke in there, in that general time period, who, we all know plenty about at this point. It makes a lot of sense that they wouldn't have reported it. I mean, when people are working the sex trade, that is a rough life, and there's usually drugs involved. There's a lot of abuse involved. And, like, these, almost without exception, as you guys, I'm sure know, like, they're vulnerable people. Like, making contact with law enforcement isn't going to be a high priority. And it's sad, because, like, obviously, if she had contact with these people, we could get, if just an anonymous call. And the other thing is too, you going back to the 90s, the sex trade on the East Coast and even the West Coast too, and it's true everywhere, but it was so prolific, and it's still there, but there's not a lot of longevity in that trade, and especially during the height of HIV and, heroin use, and then crack hits in the 80s. I mean, that is not a recipe for having a long life. And the ones that do make it out that I have met and that I know personally, man, they move on and they move past it and they never look back and have very little to do with any kind of contact with their old crew. Now, there are a few people that definitely go into like street outreach and, community service, and, God love them, because you need people like that that have been there, done that, to help the people that are currently kind of trapped in that situation. So, as a tattoo guy, I just can't picture these two women that she was with being relatives. And if they are still around, I hope that they're watching this or they get word of it, because we need to know who she is, and we need to know who Baby Doe is as well. So, like you said, connect one, connect the other. But that was my initial take on Peaches and why we have a lack of information about her.
Pam, you were talking about something really interesting earlier today with me, and I'll let you begin where you want to begin. But you were going over various things that, various people you talked to about, the hospital setting and interventions and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. In terms of Peaches when she had her child?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm just gonna make one comment to what
Yeah,
Doug
please.
said, if that's okay. I
Sure.
was thinking about, like, whoever these women were, or woman that was with her, it's interesting because she brought the child along with her to work, but the child wasn't with her at the tattoo. So was somebody there to like take care of the child when the tattoo was being done, or?
That can absolutely be true. And one of those women could have been taking care of the child. They might have been in the shop. I mean,
Yeah.
and so the baby might have been there, or they might have been there. And, our shop policy was like, hey, if you have kids, you got to wait outside or in the car. So that could have absolutely been a
I think
scenario.
you mentioned that before, yeah. So maybe
Yeah,
sitting in the car with her or something, or
absolutely. Yeah. And that could have
Yeah.
been why they were there, to help
Yeah.
Peaches,
Yeah.
we wanted to get this work done. And that could have
Right.
absolutely been it.
Right. Right. So to the hospital, John, you wanted me to go to with her giving birth, like if she was addicted to drugs, the mom.
Yeah, like, for instance, DIFUS would get called, right? Like we were
Yeah.
talking about.
Child Protective Agency. We're
Child
assuming
Protective Agency, and you brought in some enlightening information from your sources.
we're assuming that she could have been born in New York, right? The child. I mean, you're kind of thinking that that's where she was born, and being born in New York versus, if the rumors are true and she's from out, the South. If she was born in the South, it probably would have been a little bit different. But if she, New York has a lot of resources. So if you have a drug addicted mother, giving birth to a child, of course they're going to test the child. They're going to bring a social worker in. They're not going to send a child home to with a drug addicted mother. They're going to put some kind of intervention in place, some kind of plan in place. And I was kind of saying to you before that, there's many scenarios that could have happened. I mean, they could have, maybe she wasn't using drugs during the time she was pregnant, although I don't know if that's likely or not, right? But let's just say they sent her home with a plan. I mean, New York is overwhelmed with the Child Protective Services. It could have slipped through the cracks. Maybe they didn't keep up with her if she was following that plan. But usually there's a relative. They usually call in a relative to sort of like, be the second person. Like if this person is going to go home with the child is gonna go home with the mother, somebody's gotta be there to like look over the situation. And then it's possible too, if she was very addicted, the mother, and if they knew of her history and everything, they could have put her into foster care for a while and then reunited her with her mother at some point. So those are all things we just don't know, but there has to be some sort of worker, social worker, child protective service worker, because of her situation and her background, Peaches, that came forward and has to be on a hospital record.
Yeah, we're moving forward with this kind of in like a shotgun, what I call a shotgun frame of identification, because Peaches and Baby Doe have been so elusive, their identification, that we're just doing a scatter shot. We're
Right.
just shooting out in different directions,
Mhm.
hoping to find someone in one of those directions that remembers her. We're
Right.
just hoping to jog somebody's memory. And from my experience and working in a hospital, working on a unit, and having to go to the nursery to do evaluations, evaluate addicted mothers, right? I mean, definitely DIFUS would get a call. I would call DIFUS. DIFUS would come and DIFUS would make a decision, okay, on if the child goes home with the mother. Usually not.
Right.
Usually they're going to try and find somebody else in the family to take the child because they don't want to separate the family.
Right.
But, usually there's going to be an intervention, okay?
Mhm.
So like you said earlier, what that tells me is some social worker somewhere, some DIFUS worker somewhere, okay, maybe we're able to jog their memory, and maybe they can recognize, Peaches from what we're shooting out, okay? I mean, she has the peach tattoo on her chest, okay? Also, there was a cesarean operation so she could have birth. Now, was that for Baby Doe or is that for another baby? Okay, earlier, we don't know. But
Right.
would they remember a woman who was addicted, probably in withdrawal, that they had to medicate, that needed to have a cesarean operation? Okay, they had to, cut her in order to get the baby out. And also, would they remember the tattoo? Right. So there's three identifiers there that could possibly somebody could possibly remember. Tattoo being, the most important. Go ahead.
But I was just gonna say to you, not to interrupt you,
Yeah.
and Dustin, you join in here, but I don't, she might not have had the tattoo when she had the child
That's possible.
because
Mhm.
as Dustin was saying before, that she got this tattoo shortly before she was killed, so they probably
No,
don't have.
I know that's alleged that she
Okay,
got it right before she was
yeah,
killed.
yeah,
But we don't know definitely. So
yeah,
what we're doing, again, we're taking shots. We're
yeah,
taking shots. We're
yeah.
hoping somebody saw this tattoo.
Yeah, I mean,
No.
if she did not have the tattoo when she gave birth, then it's gonna be harder. They would have to narrow the group down to, light skin. I think I mean, this is all, like I said, this is all alleged information that she was a light-skinned Black woman between the ages of 20 and 30. So they'd have to like narrow it down with the cesarean, possibly drug addicted, like all that kind of thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then the other thing we're looking at too is now she leaves the hospital, she's probably going to have some kind of follow-up if they identified her addiction when she
Right.
was giving birth. You would hope so. but some slip through the cracks too. We know that, right?
But would
We
she,
know that.
yeah, she might not show up for her follow-ups, you know what I
She
mean?
may not show up.
Or if
I
she's
mean,
transient, you know what I mean? She's moving around and getting, you know, away from like, you know, the interventions that are set up for her. So if,
absolutely. Sex
yeah,
workers are very transient,
yeah,
and lots of times they won't show up because they're scared you might hit them with a urine test
right,
or evaluate them as still using, and you may want to take their child off them and put their child in some kind of protective custody, until the mother gets straightened out, which means they would put her in some kind of rehab, outpatient or inpatient. But usually, if you've got a heroin addiction or a crack addiction, you're probably going to go into inpatient first. So now you're away from your child, you're off the street, like everything that's, normal to you. You've got to kick drugs. So there's a lot of reasons why they blow off those interventions as well.
but you know, if she was a drug addict and she was, you know, a sex worker, you would think that a child protective service worker would especially keep an eye on that situation. You know what I mean? Like sort of try to follow her. Just
You would
like,
hope so.
yeah, to
Yeah,
make
you
sure
would
that
hope
the
so.
child, yeah,
And that's a good point about them wanting to follow her, because maybe that's why she ended up, in another area, because she was being followed, because they were dogging her,
yeah,
which they will do. You and I know they will do that. For to protect that child, for child protection, they'll follow up in a big way. Then another identifier, and please jump in, guys, feel free, is now you got somebody on the stroll, somebody working the street, and they have a child, they have a toddler. Okay. So I'm even reaching out to some of the girls out there that back in the day, if they're alive, that worked, the street, that walked the stroll, okay, that were dating, right? And would they, remember her, as the mother that continued to show up with a toddler on the stroll with a peach, a peach tattooed on her chest. Okay, so that's something else. All right. Plus, you mentioned that she was African American, light African American, and approximately between 20 and 30, should we say, something like that?
that's what law enforcement said, I believe. You know, I know that the tattoo artist that was interviewed said between, Dustin, correct me if I'm wrong, between 19 and 23, I think he had her on the
That
younger
sounds
side.
about right. Yeah, from what I've read.
Yeah, yeah,
And what I'm hoping is to stimulate, this situation and try to get her identified by, putting this $10,000 reward out there. That's what we're trying to do. Okay. And that just might be enough incentive for somebody to come forward, might somehow jog somebody's memory. I don't know how. I don't know. We're just, again, we're just throwing everything out there.
right,
Okay. Trying to identify this poor child and this poor mother. Because I'm going to tell you how it went down. And also, we have the jewelry. She
right,
had some jewelry, and Baby Doe was found with some jewelry.
yes,
Okay. So maybe they can be identified through that jewelry.
right,
All right. That's what we have to look at.
yeah,
But I'm going to tell you the way I think this went down. And it's heartbreaking. All right. But this is the story. This is my idea of how this went down.
Hmm.
I believe that the killer picked them up in New York or somewhere else and then got them to his house. All right. Now, Peaches has this, child with her. We think was a girl, baby girl. right? And in Peach's mind, from working with so many clients over the years, I know she's got this addiction going, probably, but also too, there's this maternal connection where she wants security and she wants security for her baby. So she's going to make sure she's looking really good. She's going to make sure the baby looks really presentable. That's why I'm talking about through the jewelry. All right. Not only the jewelry for Peaches, but Peaches made sure that Baby Doe had jewelry on as well. Okay. To make her, make them look like a really nice couple together. Right. And getting back to maternal instincts, even though a woman can have an addiction, a woman also wants security for her and her child, and she's looking for Mr. Right. Okay. She's looking for Mr. Right. Now, this guy obviously was a chameleon, obviously came on as Mr. Right to get them into the control zone, and then from the control zone into the kill zone. So try to imagine what it was like for Peaches bringing Baby Doe with her and going into somebody's house. I don't believe this took place in some hotel room or some apartment building or something. I'm thinking more of a house. Okay, bring him into the house, and she's trying to be as pleasing as possible. She's hoping, that this guy will like her, this guy will like Baby Doe. Maybe there can be a relationship there. Maybe there's that possibility. Yeah, she's got a habit, okay, but maybe she's thinking she could try harder to kick her habit, but also to procure, some kind of security for her and her child. And maybe she likes this guy. Maybe because a lot of these guys can be very, very charming, as we've seen, right? And as we know. So now they turn around and they go into this house. Well, just think of how shocked Peaches must have been when she found out she was in a house of horrors. Okay? This was a house run by the devil, a charming devil. This is no, really nice guy that he's pretended to be. Because remember, these guys are chameleons and they can really switch back and forth. All right. I mean, depending on what they want, what they need to do to get it. So the bottom line is now they're in that house and this woman gets murdered, tortured, and cut up. All right. And then after she's dead, Baby Doe's killed, and now both of them are, packed up in some which way, shape, or form. And now we see the transportation thing. And this is something that jumps out at me too. Okay. We have, this transportation. They went pretty far. I mean, where was Peaches found exactly? I have it here. I think it's Lakeview. Okay. And she was found down in or up in Lakeview. Is that it? Yeah, up to Lakeview. And then parts of her are dropped off there in that container. Parts of her are taken and scattered around, I think it's Jones Beach. I don't know about Gilgo, but definitely at Jones Beach here. I mean, those beaches are pretty close to each other, right? So anyway, now, and then you have Baby Doe put in Gilgo. She's dumped on Gilgo in the thicket there, okay, in the woods of Gilgo, right? So this guy is not scared to transport bodies and remains. And he's not scared to transport them long distances. just like Mr. Huerman, okay?
Mhm.
I mean, very similar kind of MO to me, okay?
Mhm.
Who, had no problem at all. And he's, again, innocent until proven guilty, but he is a suspect here, all
Yes,
right, for transporting up to Manorville. And what is that, Jessica Taylor in Manorville?
yes, Jessica
Okay.
Taylor and
Yeah.
Valerie Mack, but he hasn't been
Not Manorville. Where was she found? She was found up above somewhere. I'm pretty. Oh yeah, Manorville, wasn't it?
I think you're thinking of Sandra Castillo was found.
Yeah, Sandra Castillo was found elsewhere, but
Right.
Jessica Taylor was Manorville, correct?
Mhm.
Okay. So now, you have this guy, and this takes a lot of guts to be driving around because that's when they're most vulnerable. I mean, any of these serials will tell you that's when they're most vulnerable, when they have to have, a body in the car with them when they're transporting a body. All right. Because if they get caught, game's over. Right then and there, boom, you're gone. Right.
Mhm.
But this guy is so slick, and the way he handled them and the way he handled the bodies, the pieces of the bodies, right, was, pretty blatant. Okay. And he just spread them out. Now, again, what I wonder about this guy, just like in with the Jessica Taylor case, instead of just digging a hole after you have a victim and burying them, why you got to do all this and leave bodies outside above ground when you can put them under the ground and pretty much forget about them and go about your way? Why are you leaving them above ground where they can be found? Yes, I will say they weren't found for quite a while, but they were found. Okay. So, when you look at that, you have to say to yourself, this guy likes the game. He likes the action. He's getting the stimulation of taunting law enforcement, Okay. He's playing with them. And you know what? For one, looks like Rex Huerman has lost because he got arrested and he's in jail. So, this is the kind of individual you're dealing with. You're dealing with somebody who can come on and be very charming, have a lot of confidence in himself, a lot of courage, that he can transport bodies. He's either lazy and doesn't want to dig a grave and put them under the ground, or he just wants to play the game, and he knows sooner or later somebody's going to find something somewhere. They're not going to know who it is. See, that's where the control angle comes in. That's where he has control. Oh, I know who they are.
Right,
You don't know who they are, but I know who they are.
right.
See, I've got one up on you, right? So this is the whole game. This is the whole stimulation of the game. The action, okay, getting over on, the public and law enforcement. Is there anything you want to add on that? Say
Well,
about
like you said, just like he's like trying to outsmart everybody. Like, let's see if the police can figure this out. I'm smarter than them.
that's
They'll
right.
never figure it out. They'll never put it together, you know.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, that's exactly what it is. I'm smarter than they are. Nobody's as smart as me. I'm smarter than all of them, you know. And
Yeah.
it looks like, again, with Rex Huerman, his best thinking and his trying to outsmart people, again, innocent until proven guilty, but his best thinking got him in jail, and looks like he's facing, the rest of his years in prison with a lot of people that aren't so nice, they're just not really
Yep.
nice people. Some of those guys.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think, I'm sorry, Dustin.
Oh,
No,
well,
go
I'm gonna back up for a sec there on, we're talking about, markers that could potentially help identify Peaches and Baby Doe. We're gonna back up. Let's just work for a second with the idea, and I think this is probably true, that those women weren't her relatives. But there's a huge precedent that kind of comes before all this, and that in the tattoo shops, and especially when you're working in a street shop, and especially if you're working near a big city where you've got a lot of drug and a lot of street trade, you see a lot of ownership tattoos, right? They're brands essentially. It could be from somebody's old man, it could be from a pimp, and these women could have easily been from, like I said, like they could be from a stable. She could be running from, say a bad relationship or a bad scene. And, because that's a lot of how, pimps kind of roll these girls in, like, we're going to protect you. Yeah, like that's all bullshit and we know it. But, at the time, it sounds better than the situation that they're in. So those initials, and Pam, you had some great thoughts on that too. And I'll please expand on that in a sec. But those initials could, for anybody that'd been working the street trade back in the 90s, early 2000s, even the late 80s, I'm going to encourage them to think back, go back, look at that tattoo. I know that it's pretty low res, right? Like, the initials that are in that leaf are a little ambiguous, but that could easily be, it could easily be a pimp, especially if it was a brand and an ownership type of situation. Like, hey, you want to like get folded in, you want the protection, you get in the tattoo, you're one of my, now you're part of, the crew, you're one of my girls. So
Right.
that's not uncommon at all. It's creepy, but you see it all the time. So, if for anybody that was working that street trade back then that might have an inkling of like, hey man, like I knew this dude, maybe he was just a drug player, who knows? But
Right.
that might, have similar initials. Yeah, you can make an anonymous call to law enforcement too, and hopefully, maybe this person's got an arrest record. Most certainly they do. You can't work the street trade for very long, especially a place like New York City, without having a record. So, um, for the audience and for anybody that might be watching from the East Coast, like put that in the back of your noodle and see if it rings a bell with anything.
Yeah, I'm sure whoever knows her is afraid to come forward for some.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
100%, because we know she didn't exist in a vacuum.
Right.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
So, and that's, kind of back to the point we're making here is like, she's been seen with people had contact with her, but nobody's calling it in. So you're right. Like that kind of lets you know the crowd, right? Because if it was a relative, man, they'd be diming that in
Oh, sure. Yeah.
immediately. So that gives us a clue of, kind of try to focus the direction a little bit for
And then
our.
again, they could have passed themselves off as an auntie and a cousin. You know,
100%.
I mean,
Yeah,
in order not to identify themselves, just say, oh, we're her aunt or cousin,
absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what you would see. That would be typically what you would see. They're not going to be like, hey, like this is part of my street crew. They're
Yeah.
going to switch it up, my brother, my old man, my sister, whatever it is. And you're,
Right.
as a tattoo artist, you're like, yeah, you kind of, like we were talking before the show, like you can kind of pick up pretty quick on the interaction and the dynamics between the people, like what's really going on. And not all of those ownership tattoos are necessarily nefarious or seedy. Like there are some communities that there plays a part in what they're doing, but in the sex trade, that would be if Peaches was working that sex trade, and we think she was, that could easily be a brand and an ownership thing.
Right.
I just, try to imagine, unfortunately, what it was like for her when she ended up in the control zone and she knew she was at this guy's mercy. Right?
Yeah.
Now, from doing this work all these years, one thing I've learned is how important a child is to a mother. Okay. And if she's coherent at all, and probably would be, he would, this is some pretty cruel son of a bitch here, right? I mean, he's a real sadist. I mean, you got to think he's going to say, and yes, now I've, probably got the child in another room playing or something like that. Or the mother told her to go play. Well, she had a date with this guy. And then the day turned into, you know, a nightmare, right? So now he's probably, and he's either probably taunting her about the child, or because he, you know, if again, going back to Rex Heuermann, one thing we know about him, and again, I'm not saying he's the one that killed Peaches, but he is the one that taunted, you know, some of the relatives of some of the victims that he's been charged with in the Gilgo 4.
Mhm.
Okay.
Right.
So he gets off to, you know, based on what has been said, based on the allegations that have been out there, is that he enjoyed, you know, the verbal torturing on the phone over the victim, to the victim, with the victim's loved ones, you know, and you know, I've got your sister now, or I've got your daughter now. I mean, it depends on how the person moves ahead. In this situation, I have to believe, you know, that whoever this killer is, he's talking to this girl, because I believe it's a sadist. All right. And I believe he's, you know, saying to Peaches, well, now, you know, I'm going to have to deal with your daughter, you know, and she's probably restrained, or however he has her, or she's knocked out, or she's dead or incoherent. Maybe he's not saying it to her. But I just believe somebody that's this sadistic is going to, you know, keep the mother alive long enough to know that he's going to be dealing with her daughter next, just to see how the fear, just to see the fear in her eyes, to see how the fear impacts her. Because he gets off, these sadists get off on, you know, the fear, you know, in pain and suffering, you know, of loved ones. And you know, we've heard that with the, you know, the different phone calls, you know, that Rex has made. And I'm not pinning him down to Peaches. That'll be for the police to do. Right now, our job is to identify Peaches. But, you know, we've thought about this. You can't make light about this. This is a mother and her child. This is a mother and her daughter. This is we believe, and I don't think they came specifically up with the gender yet, but it's a mother with her baby, right? So, you know, I mean, you know, we got to put a full press on here. That's why I'm saying we're going to shoot in all different directions, just to see if we could jog one person's memory out there 30 years later, or 27 years later, or whatever it is, to try and get somebody to remember.
John, I just have a question. I know that they couldn't do this with Peaches because they haven't found her skull yet. But what about the child? If the child was intact, couldn't they do like a facial recognition? You know, like some kind of, you know, thing they do, an age progression thing, and I mean, maybe somebody would know who the toddler is, you know? Or
You know,
remember.
that's really above my pay grade.
Yeah, I
But,
know, but I'm wondering if they're doing that, you know, and then
well, I think if the technology is out there to do that,
Mhm.
they can do it. Okay,
Yeah,
they'll do it. They'll do it.
yeah.
Yeah,
I
they've got
mean,
it.
those guys are solid. Long Island law enforcement, the FBI to run this case, they are solid. Like I said, we worked with them early on. We had one interview with a couple of the detectives. They're great guys. They're really passionate about going to work and solving this. And this is before Burke, you know, the chief at the time, blew up the whole situation, right? And turned it into a mess. And then it took years later. And kudos to these guys. They're great. They put it all back together. And I mean, doing an outstanding job. Not a good job, an outstanding job,
Right.
right? So
Outstanding.
if it can be done,
They'll
excuse
do
me,
it.
they're going to do it. But the other thing too, keep in mind with this baby, I think it was only wrapped. Allegedly, we have it wrapped in a blanket or some kind of wrapping, and left to the elements for all
Oh,
these years, for these
mhm.
decades. Okay. Well, I'll tell you, I don't know. Because I truly believe if they could do it, it would be done. I think we've got a better shot until that happens, until they can come out with something like that. I think we have a better shot of trying to pin down people who we believe would have seen her, okay? Coming into the hospital, okay? When you're having a baby, you're kind of under a microscope by a number of different people.
Mhm.
Did she have the tattoo then? Good question. If she did have it, did they see it?
Right.
She was addicted. Knowing, when people commit addicted, you have to treat their withdrawal, okay? So she can have a decent birth of the child. So you have to try and give her meds to help her through her withdrawal. Then maybe having a difficult time with the birth, so they have to do the C-section, okay, cesarean on her, all right, to deliver the child. So, or was this a child she had earlier, prior, and she would be known for having a baby, but also having a C-section from an earlier birth somewhere else, that she gave. So it's those people that would have been involved, I believe, in that birth. Those health workers, those social workers, those nurses, those doctors that would have identified the peach, the tattoo, if she had it then, would look at the other identifiers. Then we would be talking about the DIFUS workers, the crisis workers, Pam, that would have gotten called to come in to intervene. Maybe there was an intervention of 1 or 2 times at her place, her residence, okay, where they would have identified her. These are the people where I think we've got the best shot with the people that were medical workers or in the medical field in some way, shape, or form, or in a division of youth and family services or something in some way, shape, or form that would have done an intervention. And what else do you think there? What else do you see there? Am I covering it all? Because I want to cover it all.
Yeah. Well, also, like you said, I mean, which I thought of identifying the jewelry, like
The
could,
jewelry,
I
big
mean,
thing, good, great.
if Peaches, which was found in a container, and if the container was now, there is an article that states that a hiker came across the container and, that the container was, closed. And there was a towel and a pillowcase in there. And she was in a garbage bag, right? Her torso. But if the container was closed and like Dustin said, she was found like shortly after getting that tattoo. So that's not a big span, right? I mean, is there some kind of DNA that's preserved in there, and the jewelry on her then must be in pretty good condition if she wasn't found, like if she was found pretty recent after. I mean, would you say?
I again, based on the information we have, I agree.
Yeah.
And the information that's out there.
But
Law enforcement knows more and they know better. But, the one thing I can say too is that what's very interesting that this guy, whoever the killer is, did not take a trophy.
Mm-hmm.
He did not want a trophy. And what I mean by that is he left that jewelry alone. He left that jewelry on Peaches. He left that jewelry on Baby Doe. Okay. That, to me, is a little different too. That's because usually, at the very least, these guys would grab a trophy, a souvenir from Peaches. They would have taken a piece of that jewelry, But this guy wasn't interested at all in it. He wasn't interested. So I think he's definitely more of a man of means, if you will, at that time, and not somebody that didn't know anything about jewelry or thought they might get a couple bucks. Or maybe it was he just didn't want it to ever be found on him, because that's how a lot of these guys get caught too. Their houses get tossed, and when they're raided, and when they toss the house, they find, the souvenirs or a souvenir or two, that they can tie back to a victim and bring back to a victim. So, he had his reasons, whatever they were, for not touching this jewelry at all and leaving it on the victims, Baby Doe and Peaches. Only he knows why. But, that's something else too. Like you brought out, who could recognize that jewelry? That's something else.
Right.
And maybe they wore that jewelry on the stroll.
Mhm.
Maybe she had her daughter dressed up with that jewelry on the stroll. Can people remember somebody on the stroll having a toddler in tow or having a toddler with them and wearing that type of jewelry? There's so many. I just believe somebody has seen these people.
Right.
Somebody has seen, Baby Doe and her mother somewhere, someplace, somehow, sometime. They definitely have to have relatives, some way, shape, or form, somewhere. And this is just being, I'm sure law enforcement's working overtime trying to, find out who they are, and maybe they know and they haven't let it out. I don't
Right.
know.
Right.
But we're going on what we can go on the information we have, and the information we have is that they have not been identified yet. So
Right.
tell me, what else do you guys see?
Makes me wonder a little bit, John, and it wouldn't be, because we've got body parts up in Manorville, but would a guy that's that sadistic, you talk about trophies, he left the jewelry, but would he have taken the head? I mean, certainly a head can go missing, you go dump it out in the woods, place where there's a lot of wildlife, happens all the time, but a guy that's that brutal and that sadistic, could that be his trophy?
Yes.
That's very interesting. I ran into something like that earlier in my career. But it's not nothing to talk about now. But and also too, do we have any other victims from Gilgo that were connected to any other body parts where the head was missing, or is this the only victim we know of whose head was missing?
As far as I know, I think it is the only one that's missing that we know of.
That's the way I'm looking at this, because it's the only one I know of.
Yeah.
Can I just follow up something Dustin said? The jewelry that they found earrings. So isn't it's interesting. He must have taken the earrings off of her and put them in the container where she was found, because her head is missing. So he had to take the gold earrings off her ear.
That's an interesting point, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he deliberately took them off when he was disposing of her head.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Very interesting. Very interesting. See, I think he was super cautious here, but not smart. I mean, if he really wanted to be as cautious as possible, he would have put a little effort into digging a grave for them. But I think he can be connected and knows he could be. Back then, he knew for a fact he could be connected to this woman. I really believe that. In fact, they may have had, various dates, before, the date that turned into, murder and torture. Okay.
That's an interesting point, John. I interrupt you there, but it's an interesting point, because if they, let's say hypothetically, they had multiple points of contact, that would be a way for a predator to, and especially if Peaches is working the street, let's, if she's got a pimp, I mean, that's a rough life no matter how you slice it. But that's an angle a guy could work of, I'm gonna get you off the street, gonna get you away from all that, get you cleaned up. She got, like you said, her primary, I think just instinctually, she's, probably not thinking of herself first. She's thinking of her baby, obviously, to not only give her a better life, but, maybe just get out of that life. Also, she's got some opportunities. So could easily be one of the angles this guy could work. And it might take one time, depending on how bad off Peaches is, like maybe how strung out she is, like how, what happened in her day or evening the night before. But it could easily happen, we've seen these guys do this before too. They like kind of work their way into it, gain the trust, build the rapport,
Absolutely.
and all the while it's just building it as fantasy, because he's got this plan going and he's just working his way in there, so.
Well, also, John and Dustin, to just spin off what you're saying is like, if this is a bit, if allegedly, if we're sort of building a scenario, if she was being followed around by Child Protective Services, if they were sort of trying to keep her in their sights, because of the child, then she'd want to connect with somebody like, oh, look, I have a stable life. Oh, look,
Right.
I got this guy that takes care of me now. You know what
Got
I
a guy,
mean?
got an
I got
address,
a house.
yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's an awesome point. Yeah.
Mhm.
And when we look back at Rex Heuermann, again, innocent until proven guilty, um, you know, he did have dates. Am I correct? With women for like dinner or something like that, and meet them somewhere.
Yep.
I mean, and it wasn't, right over to my house or anywhere else all the time just for sex. I mean, it seemed like there was some dating there, right? From that one girl we talked to that he tried to get her to go over to his house. But it seemed there were other people too that came up, other girls that were working the stroll that knew him. I think I forget what newspaper put it out, what news agency, but they talked about having a number of girls who said that they had met him and had talked with him. I don't know about having dinner or lunch or anything with him, but they had met him physically and decided to break the date, not to, go to, what we call the next location. I mean, the first location's control. The second location, is where everything's going to happen. You never go to the second location, and so he got people under his control. Whoever pulled this off was charming enough with some women, but some women could see right through him, and they didn't buy it, and they didn't go with him. Unfortunately, I think Peaches did go, and I think he knew he's been seen with her, and he could be identified through her, and that's why he put an extra effort into disposing of her. And the big distance between where she was found and parts of her were found and where the baby Doe was found.
Right.
And he did some transporting and traveling there.
Most
Right.
definitely.
And he had a storage locker, so I guess he could have gone back and forth to use that when he needed to too, right?
I wonder about that when you mentioned that the storage locker, because I'm sure if Ellie hasn't gone over that with a fine tooth comb, they will. But
Oh, sure.
I mean, there's only so much they can do too in a day. I mean, I think they're moving pretty fast, with the work they have, and I think they're doing a great job. But it's going to take some time, and this, because if you look at this Rex Uerman case, this is moving pretty fast,
Mhm.
pretty
Right.
fast. It's been about a year, and we have a number of victims, a good number of victims identified. And, I got to tell you, if he is found to be the serial killer that we suspect, he is a suspect, we suspect he is. I mean, let me tell you what, there's a lot of victims,
Oh, yeah.
and they're not just around Gilgal
Yeah,
or
exactly.
Maynardville.
Yeah, he's got multiple places around the
He's
country.
traveled. He's
Yeah.
traveled.
Oh, yeah.
And when you travel with that kind of addiction traveling inside of you, it's going to come out. It's going to come out.
Absolutely.
And an addiction for lust and torture and murder and
Sure.
Mhm.
what else? Do we have anything else that might help us identify Peaches or Baby Doe?
I don't have anything else on the tattoo front. I, I would love, I mean, I'd cut off a finger to be able to talk to the tattoo guy, but it's understandable. I'm not, casting shade on that dude at all. I mean, he may be working with law enforcement, he may not, I don't know. But since an investigation's still active, my suspicion would be that he's, given the information that's relevant to the right people, if that information is there. But just as an artist, I would be, I was talking with Pam earlier, I'm curious about the interaction that happened during that appointment. Not that there's going to be one big light bulb moment or anything, but it would quantify, and qualify some questions that I have about that relationship, even though I think I know what it is. But, when you work a tattoo shop like that, like you get pretty good at picking up on stuff. And just be interesting to know like how he viewed that appointment.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, what did he pick up on exactly?
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, because he's a tattoo artist that's been around. Like he wasn't just some green kid. So he's obviously got, you can't work at a street shop and not have some decent perception, sometimes your life depends on it. But most of the way is just, it's good security, it's good customer interaction. So you got to pick up on a lot of things in order to make things kind of roll from one end to the next through an appointment. So
But Dustin, can I just ask you this, though,
Sure.
that remark that this tattoo artist supposedly made, like that she felt like she had a piece taken from her. Like, I know that bitten peach is sort of like a sexual thing.
Mhm.
But I mean, that kind of a piece taken out of you sounds like heartbreaking almost, right? Like
Yeah, and that could absolutely fit too, because I had read some comments that, at the time of that appointment, that there was, she was leaving a bad boyfriend or a relationship of some kind. So it 100% could be a
right,
complete personal thing, and
right,
that's kind of the tough thing when we're like kind of analyzing, imagery, is that, and especially tattoos. I mean, you could take one thing that means something to one group of people, and you can co-opt it into another group of people, and they mean completely different things because it's such a personal deal, getting a tattoo a lot of the time. And sometimes people don't realize that there are connotations to tattoos that may not be what their
right.
intent for them to communicate is. So
Mhm.
it could absolutely 100% be the case. And you definitely see that stuff in the street trade. Um, some stuff like you do a lot of work that is sometimes hard to do for that reason, because that it's coming from a darker place inside of somebody, and it's their way of, because when we just look at how we treat, whether it's mental illness or depression or anything in this country, it's never been one taken very seriously. There's a lot of places you can't get resources for that, and especially going back a bunch of years, few decades, that a lot of times in the tattoo shop that was people's way of being able to communicate what was going on inside. And it still is. I mean, you could really argue that that is kind of at the genesis of all tattoos. Not all of it's certainly negative and not all of it's heartbreaking, but that's an excellent point. And it could 100% fit right in there because we know she wasn't, I don't think not often, and especially if you're a sex worker, you're not leaving necessarily like a really good life for the street. That does happen, but my take on Peaches is that she was probably like a lot of women in her position, struggling, and now she's got a kid and she's trying to make ends meet. And the only way that she probably can, which is going to
Yeah.
take a huge toll out of her, both physically and emotionally and psychically. So to have a tattoo that was communicating, and especially on her chest, could, hey, there's a piece of me gone, piece of my heart gone, 100%.
Well,
And she's
yeah,
got a
and
habit too,
it's,
she's got to feed. She's not only got to feed herself and the child,
That's
she's got
right.
to feed your habit.
That's right.
But
Yeah,
you-
rough
But-
stuff.
and you know
rough stuff.
that the tattoo was on the left breast, which is near the heart, right?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
kind of,
Good
that's
point,
kind of,
Pam, good
yeah.
point.
yeah.
Mhm.
So anyway, is there anything else, or do we feel we've covered everything we can cover for today?
I've got everything, until I think if we could get a little, another clue pops up or
Mm.
something, but and especially Pam, like with your analysis of this thing and, the contact with the medical community and the social services community. I mean, yeah, there has to be like not just a personal interaction, but there has to be some paper data on her somewhere.
Sure.
Almost certainly. So I think that was a incredibly
yeah.
valuable.
It would probably be like a long process to narrow all those women down that went, but still in all, you can just weed through them until you
Yeah,
think you
absolutely.
come up with,
Yeah, you've got some parameters to work
Yeah,
with,
right.
that help distill it a little bit. So I just think that's a really thoughtful and, a place that somebody could actually track her down.
Mhm. Yeah.
Well, with
where-
that being said,
Sorry,
is there
John, go
anything
ahead.
else, Dustin? Anything else?
No, I'm good, brother. I'm good.
Okay. I mean, with that, we've done some brainstorming here for Baby Doe and Peaches, and let's see how it if anything comes out of it, how it all pans out. Maybe we're going to jog somebody's memory somewhere. You never know. You just never know how these things come about and how they're identified, But I want to thank you guys so much. Dustin, thank you so much. Really appreciate you. Pam, thank you so much. Terrific job, guys. You guys did a terrific job. Thank you so much. And I want to thank our audience. Thank you so much for tuning in. We really appreciate you. As I said, certainly send us your comments, how you feel. Tell us if we're right, wrong, or indifferent. We're okay with it. We have open minds. When we're right, we're right. When we're wrong, we're wrong. What can I tell you? That's how we live, right? So the bottom line is take care of yourselves. Stay safe out there. It's a very violent world we live in. And make it a great day. And God bless. Till next time. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, John and Pam. It's good
Thank
seeing
you,
you.
John. Thanks, Dustin, Leah.